Is Blake Snell a realistic option for the Boston Red Sox? More on today's Locked on Red Sox.
You are Locked on Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked on Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut, former ESPN social media associate and current host of the Boston Balling podcast as well. And I am here to bring you the latest in all things Boston Red Sox, Monday through Friday, straight to your favorite podcast feed. And the best part is it is all completely free. So you might as well tune in because Locked On is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Happy Wednesday. Congratulations on making it halfway through the week. And this is the time of year where I start to get really excited because the holidays are coming up, and that means, taking some days off from work and being able to spend quality time with family and friends. And not only that, but this is also the time of year when things start to pick up in the baseball world. Free agency negotiations, trades starting to happen, and that makes me very excited for the next couple months. And what I'm hoping for is that the Red Sox have a much more active offseason than they had last year, because the biggest thing for me was I remember at this time last year getting super excited about the Red Sox offseason and being curious to see what moves they were going to make. And then they had a very underwhelming offseason relative to what they said they were going to do and how they made it seem like the offseason was going to go. So I would be very upset if the offseason goes the same way as it did last year. But Craig Breslow said yesterday that he very much is treating this offseason in a way that he wants to get this team back in a spot to be able to compete for the World Series. Now, obviously, actions speak louder than words there, and I'm not buying into that at all until they start making some moves to show that they mean that they want to get this team back into World Series contention. But he spoke with a lot of conviction and confidence when he said that, and we haven't really seen a ton of that from Breslow since taking over in his role with this Boston Red Sox organization. So that's very promising, and some of the moves that they do make might be more aggressive than others as long as the moves that they're making are the right ones, because they did try to make some moves at the trade deadline this past season to acquire some players to help this team get better, but they didn't exactly hit on those moves that they made. So now the biggest question with Breslow is going to be, how good is his ability to evaluate high-level talent? Does he have the capability of bringing in the players who are going to succeed and be able to give this team a better chance to be able to be a contender in 2025? Because he hasn't exactly hit on a lot of those moves that he's made so far with this Boston Red Sox organization. But one move that is intriguing that people have been talking about potentially being a situation for the Red Sox is pitcher Blake Snell coming to Boston. Now, when you think of Blake Snell, you probably think of injuries and inconsistency, both of which are correct. He hasn't been able to stay healthy a lot over the course of his career, and he's been very inconsistent, likely as a direct result of the injuries and not being able to stay on the field consistently. So therefore, he hasn't had his best outings a lot of times, at least as much as we would want to see him have his best outings. But that being said, when he has his best stuff, he is almost unhittable. I mean, this is the type of player that when he's at his best, you want him in your pitching staff and you want him as that ace caliber starter. Now, granted, I mean, a Blake Snell who's healthy and pitching not at his absolute best, but pitching maybe a little bit worse than that is still better than the majority of the Red Sox starting rotation right now. And that's the biggest thing to remember here is him coming into Boston would be an upgrade in the rotation no matter what from what they already have now. And he certainly would be a useful arm that could help with that if he's able to stay healthy. I mean, if they bring him in and it's a Lucas Giolito situation where they find out he's going to be out for the year. Obviously, what good does that do for the Red Sox? But if he is able to go out there and pitch consistently, he will give the Red Sox more than what they had from their starting rotation in 2024. But the question of whether he's going to truly be an ace comes into play when you think about his last few seasons and where he was at when he was injured and overcoming an injury. But he had a 1.23 ERA over his final 14 starts in 2024, including pitching a no-hitter in the mix and a separate 15 strikeout performance. According to the stats and the numbers, he was literally the best pitcher in baseball from July onward. So first of all, he was able to stay healthy for the last few months of the season. So that's huge. And when you add in how successful he was on the mound in those last few months, it's hard to argue that wouldn't be super beneficial for the Red Sox, because that's exactly the kind of firepower that the Red Sox need in order to make it back to the playoffs and in order to get back to being a little bit more than a mediocre average baseball team. The question is the front office willing to pay top dollar to get somebody like Blake Snell, because he's projected to get about $160 million in free agency. And that's the biggest thing here, because whenever it comes to those types of deals, those are the deals that the Red Sox have shied away from in the last few seasons. Those are the types of deals that the Red Sox don't really want to make. But the most obvious thing to any Red Sox fan or analyst alike is that they need an ace caliber starting pitcher this offseason. And whether they get that via trade or free agency is still yet to be determined, but they do absolutely need that type of arm. And I'm sure they'll look to free agency as a solution to their lack of having an ace right now, because there are plenty of ace caliber starters available, but they also could look to the trade market, which I'm going to be talking a little bit more about later in the show. But this Blake Snell contract is projected to be about $160 million for 5 years. I mean, he has won the Cy Young twice, and he has shown that he can really be a high caliber pitcher. His overall ERA on the season was a 3.12, which obviously is still good and is better than most of the starters that the Red Sox had in 2024. But again, it's going to be down to how healthy can he be for the season, because we know that he can eat innings and we know he's the type of guy who can get the job done. I just want to see him be able to be more consistent on the mound. But even if he's not incredibly consistent, his raw ability alone puts him ahead of where some of these Red Sox starters are at. So that's a big question going into this offseason is, can the Red Sox get Blake Snell? Of course they can. They're the Boston Red Sox. They can afford to get anybody they want to get. But the question is, will they? And are they willing to do that? Because the willingness is the part that I am failing to see from them, and that drive and motivation to actually go out and sign people. So the biggest thing to me moving forward is going to be, do they have the willingness to sign somebody like Blake Snell? And it's only a matter of time before we find that out, because he is a Scott Boras client. That's the other thing too, is that Boras is known for making sure that his clients don't settle and that they are seeking and getting the absolute best possible contract they can get. So the minute the Red Sox think they can try to shortchange this, if they are really serious about getting him, is the minute that he's going to walk away and go elsewhere. So that is the type of situation where the Red Sox cannot be afraid to go out and be aggressive. because I'm sure that Snell and Boris will try to maybe lock in a 6-year deal. He's pitched at such a high level that it's easy to see why he might want that. But the likelier outcome is that shorter term deal, 4 years at a super premium annual rate, or 5 years at a very strong but a little bit slightly lesser annual rate. That's what I think would happen. And, who knows? I mean, he might be re-signed by the Giants, but the Red Sox definitely have a shot. I mean, we shouldn't be ruling it out. Their biggest threat is themselves, honestly, if they are not willing to pay that kind of money. But if they are, I think it's pretty easy to convince Snell to go to a place like Boston, one of the most historic franchises in baseball. And if he knows he could be that guy who's in the spotlight, that number one ace caliber starter, it could make a lot of sense for him to go there. It's just a matter of making sure he can, one, stay on the field, and two, that the Red Sox are willing to make that kind of move. So we'll see what happens there, and time will tell. But we've talked about free agency and what the Red Sox may or may not do in free agency, but could they utilize the trade market to get a really high caliber star-studded starting pitcher? That's also a possibility, and I'm going to be talking about that next. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. The longer you wait to sign up for FanDuel, the more you're missing out on making big money. And I've seen my husband do it. He takes a lot of advantage. So make sure that you download FanDuel today if you're looking to make just some extra pocket cash. The Boston Red Sox have a lot of work to do this offseason when it comes to improving this team. They need to address their pitching situation majorly. I mean, they need to get definitely an ace caliber starting pitcher and quite possibly another starting pitcher as well. They also need to seriously address the bullpen and basically revamp that pen, maybe maintaining a few players in there who showed promise in 2024. But overall, their bullpen needs work. They need to find a right-handed bat because they didn't extend the qualifying offer to Tyler O'Neill. So if he walks and ends up going elsewhere, they need to replace his power in the lineup and that versatility that he provides with a right-handed bat and a lefty-heavy lineup. So that's another checklist item that the Red Sox need to try to cross off, is addressing the right-handed bat situation. So overall, they have a relatively big checklist of things they need to do this offseason in order to get themselves back into contention in 2025. Now, they can sign whoever they want realistically in free agency. They just need to be willing to dish out the money and act like the Boston Red Sox that we all know they are and can be. But the question is, are they going to be willing to spend that type of money? And I am inclined right now to say that they are not, because we haven't seen them do that and haven't seen a pattern in the last few seasons of them being willing to spend money. So will they look to free agency? Maybe, but I could see them more likely looking to the trade market, trying to trade for an ace caliber starting pitcher and moving some key prospects potentially to get that player. And one of those players who pops into my head is Garrett Crochet of the White Sox. The White Sox have said before that they may not want to move any of their starting pitchers, but to me, that's pretty silly given how horrific they were this past season. So I feel like they might change their mind if they hear some good offers from teams. And if the Red Sox are one of those teams that's in the mix, they could be a landing spot for him. And it's interesting because they do have both the capital and prospects to either sign a top flight starting pitcher in free agency or bring in a cost controlled impact arm via trade. And Breslow and the Red Sox should leave no stone unturned this winter when it comes to stockpiling talent in their rotation. So that's why I feel like it's possible that they could trade for Garrett Crochet. The Red Sox system right now is in such a good place in terms of young talent because if they did decide that they wanted to get a cost controlled starting pitcher who's on the younger side, Crochet kind of fits that mold, especially if they're hesitant about spending heavily on pitchers over the age of 30. Crochet is only 25, so that could make him an appealing target for the Red Sox. And not only is he under team control for another 2 seasons, but he's a 6'6" lefty who absolutely has ace-like stuff on the mound, as he fanned 209 batters over just 146 innings last season with the White Sox. He did pitch to a 3.58 ERA, and obviously his win-loss record just shouldn't even be talked about because of how bad the White Sox actually were. But he gets tons of swings and misses, and it's really hard for opposing hitters to go up against him. But prying away a cost-controlled stud pitcher like Crochet from the White Sox will cost a hefty deal for the Red Sox. Likely they would need to part ways with some of their top prospects like Marcelo Meyer, Roman Anthony, Christian Campbell, or Kyle Teal. It would likely take at least one of those prospects, probably just one if they couple in a talented big league player, one of which could be Tristan Casas. Now, I like Casas, and obviously his season last year was unfortunate with his injury and not being able to play for most of it. But in 2023, he had a great rookie season, and he definitely has such a high ceiling. But if the Red Sox are really serious about trading for somebody like Crochet, it might make sense for them to take Tristan Casas and package him in with one of those top prospects to get him, because that is the type of price that they would have to pay. Now, the reason I said Casas in particular is because the infield situation is something the Red Sox have to address anyway, because they don't know for sure who the second starting baseman at second base right now is going to be. Likely it's going to be Vaughn Grissom, but we'll have to see how spring training goes. And he obviously has been injured, so he hasn't gotten a chance to play that position for Boston yet. So I'm assuming it will likely be him, but the Red Sox are going to have to decide that. And then if he's at second base and then they have Trevor Story at shortstop, then you have the corner infield that right now you would think would be Casas at first and Devers at third. But if they do decide that getting Garrett Crochet is more important than keeping Tristan Casas, then what I could see them doing is moving Casas and then moving Rafael Devers to first base potentially, and signing somebody like Alex Bregman to play third base, or keeping Devers at third base and maybe signing Vlad Guerrero Jr., for example, who had a really good season in 2024, to play first base. Again, this involves the Red Sox spending money, which they still have to do in the whole situation. But if they like the idea of Crochet a little bit more than they like starters who are on the free agent market because of the team control aspect and the fact that he's younger, I don't think they'd be afraid to pull that plug. Now, am I saying I agree with it? It's hard to say, because on one hand, I agree with it because they do need the ace caliber starting pitching, and Crochet would be a great fit. But on the same token, does it really make sense to get rid of one of those prospects that the Red Sox have been so adamant on not moving the last few seasons and building the team around? And those players have been the reason they haven't been as aggressive when it comes to the major league roster. Does it make sense to trade one of those prospects when there are already good starting pitchers on the free agent market? That is the question that we are asking here. And that's why it's a tough decision. I don't think there's really a win in the situation for the Red Sox front office, because I think they would get backlash either way. Because if they go out and they trade for Crochet and they give up one of those big four prospects, and then they have to trade Tristan Casas too, I think a lot of fans would be outraged by that because I don't think fans want to part ways with any of those 4 prospects, which I totally and completely understand. But on the opposite side of that, if they don't trade for Crochet and they keep all of these guys in the system and they were to sign a talented starter that's on the free agent market, I could see people saying they could have done better and gotten somebody younger if they did it via trade. So I don't think there's really a win for the Red Sox front office with the fans regardless, but I do think that fans will be happy a little bit at least if they make some sort of big move for somebody like that, whether it's to trade for Crochet or sign a free agent starter. I do think at the end of the day that fans will be happy if they do one or the other. So hopefully they do one or the other and at least show that they were willing to make a big play for a starting pitcher. So Garrett Crochet to Boston, is it realistic? I think it's a little bit less realistic than people might think. I feel like the Red Sox don't feel like they're in a position to be trading those kinds of prospects for Garrett Crochet. I think they would love to have him on the team, no doubt about it. It's hard to argue that what he brings to this Red Sox team wouldn't help them and benefit them in the long run. But I think it's more about the Red Sox not feeling like they want to move on from any of those top 4 prospects. So I'm not really convinced that they would make that type of move for a pitcher like Crochet. I think they would be more likely to look towards some of those free agent starters. But again, who knows what's running through Breslow's head right now, and John Henry more so in particular. Is he okay with Breslow spending that kind of money to sign a starting pitcher who might be on the older side? Or would he prefer that they look to the trade market and be aggressive and not be afraid to move players? Either scenario, it's hard to wrap your head around because the Red Sox haven't really made those types of moves in a while. So it's hard to convince yourself that they'll do it now. But it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. And if the Red Sox do decide that Garrett Crochet is going to be the guy, then they maybe move one of those prospects with possibly Tristan Casas. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But coming up, the Red Sox are making a huge push to host the All-Star Game in 2029. All about that next. Your sex life is important, but your schedule is busy. You don't have the time to go to a doctor's office to get treated for ED. Through HIMS, you can get a personalized ED treatment without stepping foot outside your door. The process is 100% online, so there is no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. I'm telling you, for some of you out there who are listening, there's no way it wouldn't be beneficial. So check that out today. For most of us that like collecting cards, the idea of spending $2,000 or more on a Luka, Ellie De La Cruz, or Mahomes rookie card just isn't in the cards. I love collecting, but that's some serious money to drop. Thanks to slab packs from arenaclub.com, now it's possible to score gem mints for a fraction of their retail price. Every card that I listed was hit from last week's Arena Club slab pack drop. Arena Club is the only repack that provides real value, a complete view of all possible cards, and clear hit rates for each one. Arena Club slab packs are revolutionizing the repack game with transparency. My husband loves Arena Club because he collects all of his baseball cards through there. and it helps him to keep them all organized and keep track of which ones he's getting. So I highly recommend it if you're a big card collector like him. Right now, you can get 10% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/lockedon and use code LOCKEDONMLB. That's arenaclub.com/lockedon, code LOCKEDONMLB for 10% off your first purchase. It's so much fun if you're a big card collector, so I highly recommend utilizing it. As we focus on the Boston Red Sox offseason and what needs to be done in order to make this team better and ready to go for 2025, there's also some exciting news coming out of Fenway because the Red Sox are supposedly making a serious push to host the 2029 All-Star Game at Fenway Park, which is super exciting. I've never been to the All-Star Game before, and that would absolutely be a dream of mine to go. And if it's at Fenway, I would 100% be going. This would mark the 30th anniversary of the iconic 1999 All-Star Game, which was at Fenway Park. The Red Sox hosted the All-Star Game and weekend for the first time in decades. It was supposed to be a swan song for Fenway Park, which they were going to leave in order to get a better, more updated stadium. But hosting All-Star Weekend there literally saved the ballpark. Could you imagine how sad it would have been if Fenway was no longer a thing? So obviously, Red Sox fans are very grateful that that took place. The game was so good that they ended up deciding to keep the ballpark after that. Ted Williams, who's obviously the greatest Red Sox player of all time and the greatest hitter of all time at that point, was the man to throw the first pitch. And then he handed the ball to Pedro Martinez, who at the time was the team's newest addition. He pitched an absolute gem, cutting through the National League's lineup like a hot knife through butter, literally just smoked them. And that game proved that Fenway was still a great stadium, keeping it going for the foreseeable future, which thank God, it would have been so sad to have a different stadium. With the anniversary of that game coming up, that's why the Red Sox want to specifically host it in 2029, because they want to pay homage and get their first game in a weekend in decades once again, and maybe have another legendary All-Star game. So they're going to be making a big push to host All-Star Weekend in 2029 because they feel like it's only appropriate in order to honor a game that was absolutely legendary and also saved the ballpark as we know it. And I feel like having the All-Star Game at Fenway Park would be really cool because not only would it be great for Red Sox fans to be able to have it local to them so they can go, but also with how historic the ballpark is, they could even do some sort of cool presentation ahead of time before the game just about how many legendary players have played at this specific ballpark. Because if you think about it, with how far back Fenway goes, there have been so many players over time that have played at Fenway Park, and they could maybe even do a throwback to some of the All-Stars throughout the years that played in a Red Sox uniform at Fenway and then go to present day and take a look at the current All-Stars that are playing in the game at Fenway Park. So I feel like there's a lot of cool things they could do with it. And also for people who have never been to Fenway before, this could be excuse for those people to go, because I've seen a lot of people on Twitter say, oh, I've never been to Fenway before. Like, I'd love to go there. And what better reason to say I'm going to check Fenway Park off my list than to go to the All-Star Game there, where you can see a lot of different players from around the league, as opposed to just watching the Red Sox play and another team, which obviously for me personally, I'm biased, so I enjoy just watching the Red Sox play. But for people who are just baseball fans that maybe aren't a fan of a specific team, they just like watching a lot of different players, going to the All-Star Game at Fenway could be a great opportunity for those types of people. So I really like the idea of it. And hopefully the Red Sox are back to, being competitive by then, so that they have multiple All-Stars in 2029, so that when it's on their home field, it's more special to them because they can say, we play all of our home games here and now we get to play in the All-Star Game here. So I feel like it would be a great spot for it. And also because the All-Star Game takes place in July and it's hot, we don't have to worry about sitting in the freezing cold in Boston for the All-Star game, because yes, it might get cool at night, but since it's the summer, it's not going to be like it is at this time of year. So that's another plus side to it. I just think Boston is a must-see place for everybody, and having it at Fenway Park in a historic year that marks what was a historic game that saved the ballpark could be a way for them to look back at it and say, thank you to the 1999 All-Star game for keeping us here in this ballpark. And along those same lines, I actually have an interesting story about Fenway Park and it not being saved. So my mother-in-law was at Fenway for a Red Sox game one time, and she happened to meet John Henry there. Like, he was literally like walking around the ballpark, and she just happened to kind of run into him. And he asked her that day if she thinks that they should relocate the ballpark or move the Red Sox to a different ballpark and not have them play at Fenway anymore. And she said, of course not. Fenway is legendary. You definitely need to keep them here. So now here they are to this day, still at Fenway Park. And I always thought that story was funny. And I thought this was the appropriate time to tell it because we're talking about the All-Star game potentially being played at Fenway. But the biggest reasons why I feel like it makes a lot of sense to have it at Fenway, historic mark of the anniversary of the 1999 game, where they can show appreciation for Fenway and all of their favorite memories there. 2, the history that is involved with Fenway Park. They can do a throwback to all the All-Stars that they've had play at Fenway in the past, and then skip to the current All-Stars and show all of them. And number 3, because it's a must-see ballpark for a lot of people that's on their bucket list, it could be a great opportunity for them to check off Fenway for the 2029 All-Star game. So I'm really hoping they get it, especially because since it's been such a long time since the All-Star game was played at Fenway Park, I feel like Boston just needs it again. And it would just be a great experience. I know I'm going to be the first in line to be going if it's at Fenway Park. So what an exciting opportunity for Fenway and the Boston Red Sox. We're just going to have to stay tuned as to what happens there and how it goes and if it ends up being granted to Fenway. But I'm super excited about it. I hope the Red Sox get the opportunity to host the All-Star game because it seems like such a cool opportunity that I think any ballpark would absolutely jump on if given the chance. So we'll see what happens there. Thank you for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, you can find Locked On MLB wherever you listen to podcasts or on YouTube. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Sully is so funny. I've done shows with him before. You'll really enjoy it. So you can catch his show right after this. As always, keep the faith, go Red Sox, and I will catch you on the flip side.